A wealthy property tycoon, a man who meticulously planned every detail of his future, boards a private jet with his young, flawless fiancée. He feels invincible. But the moment the pilot appears, his world screeches to a halt. It isn't the man he expected, but the woman he abandoned 5 years ago. A woman who now holds his life and a life-altering secret in her hands. Right before we take off, give this video a like, subscribe so you don't miss any of our stories, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The stewardess, with a pristine smile, announces, "Sir, 3 minutes to take off." Alonso Vega, a champagne flute in hand, stares out the window, soaking in the warm breeze of a late afternoon in Sydney. He'd just closed $1 billion deal. By his side, 20-year-old model Chloe Winters touches up her lipstick, oblivious to the emotional tsunami brewing within him. Alonso, a man who never left anything to chance, was savouring his victory and the promise of a romantic weekend in the Whitsunday Islands. At that moment, his phone buzzes. An anonymous message, a single chilling sentence. "She's in the cockpit, and so is your boy." The champagne catches in his throat. "My son? Impossible," he mutters, glancing at Chloe, who hadn't noticed the 7 words that had unleashed a hurricane. Ignoring the crew's protests, Alonso lurches to his feet and sprints down the aisle. He yanks the cockpit door open with unnecessary force, freezing at the scene that will change his life forever. At the controls isn't a man, but the woman he walked out on 5 years ago, Sophia Torres. By her side, in a tiny pilot's uniform, is a 5-year-old boy, a perfect mini replica of him. Time stands still. The roar of the engines, the electronic beeps from the control panel, all fade into the deafening silence of this impossible reunion. Alonso feels his blood turn to ice as his brain struggles to process the scene. "Sir, I must ask you to return to your seat. We're about to take off." Sophia speaks with a professional calm that brutally contrasts the storm in her green eyes. There isn't a tremor in her voice to betray the emotional cyclone raging inside. The boy turns, his big, curious brown eyes, the very same as Alonso's, sparkling with innocence and excitement. "G'day, I'm Leo. You like planes? This one's my favorite," he says, holding up a miniature model. I... For the first time in his life, Alonso Vega, the property tycoon known for his eloquence in any situation, is completely speechless. "Sir, you must return to your seat for takeoff." A stewardess, Carla, appears behind him. "Right," he mumbles automatically, his gaze still fixed on the innocently smiling boy. "Right." Stumbling back down the aisle, Alonso returns to his seat, his body on autopilot while his mind spins in a vortex. Those eyes, that chin, even the way he cocks his head, there is no doubt. "What's wrong, babe? You look as pale as a ghost." Chloe touches his arm. Her concern is obvious. A ghost? Alonso thinks. Yeah, that's exactly what it was. The ghost of his past, of decisions made with the calculated coldness that had always guided his life. The ghost of a relationship he'd ended with a simple note, without looking back, without considering the consequences beyond his own emotional comfort. "Nothing," he lies, his voice hoarse. "Just a bit dizzy." The aircraft's communication system hums, then Sophia's controlled voice fills the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Welcome aboard. Our flight to the Whitsundays is expected to take 2 hours and 40 minutes. The weather is perfect for flying. Please keep your seatbelts fastened for takeoff, relax, and have a great flight." Alonso closes his eyes, every word of hers piercing him like a needle. Captain? Of course, she'd become a pilot. Sophia had always been brilliant, determined, capable of conquering anything she set her mind to. A talented aerospace engineer. She talked about aviation with a fiery passion, even when he, condescendingly, suggested it was just a hobby. The jet hurtles down the runway, pinning him to his seat. As the plane gains altitude, Alonso feels his perfectly controlled world spiraling into a nosedive. Who sent that message? The question forms in his mind, making him check his phone again. Unknown number, no identification. How could anyone know? How could someone predict this impossible meeting? Let's toast to our weekend, Chloe suggests, her momentary worry gone, pouring 2 flutes of Dom Perignon. Alonso nods mechanically, his gaze still lost in the void, his fingers touching the small object in his jacket's inner pocket. The engagement rings he planned to use to seal a future that, in the last 5 minutes, had become terrifyingly uncertain. To us. She raises her glass, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. At 20, Chloe represents everything he values: beauty, youth, an absence of emotional complications, and an almost reverential admiration for his position and power. To us, he responds automatically, the bubbly liquid tasteless down his throat. For the next hour, Alonso pretends to work on his tablet, numbers and charts dancing senselessly before his eyes, while his mind reconstructs fragments of the past. He remembers his last night with Sophia, their argument about commitment, about building something real together. He remembers his own silent panic at the prospect of emotional vulnerability, the cold decision to cut all ties, to simply vanish. We're hitting a little bit of turbulence. Sophia's voice returns to the comm system. Please keep your seatbelts fastened until the sign goes off. The aircraft shakes slightly, mirroring Alonso's internal turmoil. Chloe grabs his arm, her fear of flying suddenly visible on her flawlessly made-up face. It's all good, he reassures her mechanically, the words ringing hollow. Nothing was good. Nothing would ever be good again. Mr. Vega, the stewardess approaches discreetly a few minutes later. The captain requests your presence in the cockpit if possible. Alonso's stomach tightens. Chloe raises an eyebrow, intrigued. Since when do pilots call passengers to the cockpit during flights? Must be about the ETA. I'll be back in a minute. He unfastens his seatbelt. Every step towards the cockpit feels like an eternity. The jet's luxurious aisle, which had always represented his success and power, now feels like a narrow tunnel leading to an inevitable confrontation with the consequences of his decisions. Upon entering the cockpit, he only finds Leo still playing with his toy plane. The boy smiles at him. Mum said to wait here because she had to check something in the back. Want to see my plane collection? The boy opens a small, colourful backpack, revealing carefully organised miniatures. Alonso slowly sits in the co-pilot seat, looking at this child, his son, with a mix of fascination and terror. How was it possible for this little person to exist without him knowing? How was it possible for something so significant to happen in a world he always believed he controlled completely? This one's my favourite, Leo continues, oblivious to the emotional turmoil of the man beside him. It's a Boeing 737 Dreamliner. Mum says one day we'll pilot a real one together. Is your mum a good pilot? Alonso asks, his voice barely a whisper. The best in the world. The boy's enthusiasm is contagious. She knows everything about planes, and she teaches me maths and physics too. I'm going to be a pilot like her when I grow up. The cockpit door opens, and Sophia returns. Her gaze meets Alonso's for a brief moment before she turns back to the instruments. Leo, darling, Carla will take you to see the rest of the plane, okay? I need to speak with Mr. Vega. The boy nods eagerly, gathering his planes before following the stewardess. When the door closes, the silence in the cockpit becomes almost tangible. He doesn't know. Sophia finally speaks, her eyes fixed on the control panel. To him, his dad's a pilot who works international routes and can't be around. Why didn't you tell me? Alonso questions, his voice trembling with contained emotion. Tell you? She finally turns to face him, years of pain held in her gaze. The man who disappeared and left only a note, who blocked my number, who instructed his staff to tell me he'd moved to another country. Alonso has no answer. For the first time, he sees the magnitude of his actions through someone else's eyes. I found out I was pregnant 3 weeks after you left, her controlled professional voice continues. And I decided my son deserved more than a father who didn't want to be found. The plane shakes again with more turbulence, reflecting Alonso's inner turmoil. And this meeting is a coincidence? A faint smile appears on Sophia's lips. Do you believe in coincidences, Alonso? In a world with thousands of pilots and hundreds of executive aviation companies? Before he can answer, the panel emits an alert that demands Sophia's attention. Please return to your seat. We have a technical issue to resolve. What kind of issue? The concern is evident in his voice. Nothing your precious model fiancé needs to worry about, Sophia responds, the first hint of emotion in her otherwise perfectly controlled voice. Just a secondary hydraulic system failure. We'll have to make an unscheduled landing for a check. Alonso stands, stunned. Where? Hobart, she replies, adjusting some controls. A small island with a good runway and great mechanics. As she mentions the island's name, their eyes meet again, and Alonso understands. It wasn't just any place with a suitable runway. It was where Sophia lived, where his son was growing up. This isn't a coincidence, is it? He murmurs, the realization finally hitting him. Sophia's gaze is indecipherable as she responds. Life rarely gives us second chances, Alonso. What we do with them is our choice. As he returns to his seat, feeling the plane begin a gentle descent, Alonso rereads the mysterious message on his phone. She's in the cockpit, and so is your boy. Who could have known? Who was orchestrating this impossible reunion? He glances at Chloe, distracted by a fashion magazine, completely oblivious to the emotional earthquake that was redefining the landscape of his life. The rings in his pocket now feel like they weigh a ton as the jet descends towards a small island he senses will change his destiny forever. Any problems? Chloe asks, noticing his disturbed expression. Change of plans, he replies, his voice strangely calm considering the internal chaos. We'll need to make a technical stop before we get to the resort. The landing signal lights up, and Sophia's voice, professional and controlled, fills the cabin one last time. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll begin our descent procedure for Hobart Regional Airport. Due to technical reasons, we'll be making an unscheduled stop. We ask that you remain in your seats with your seatbelts fastened. Thank you for your understanding. Alonso Vega, the man who built a property empire, planning every move with millimeter precision, who never left anything to chance, now finds himself completely adrift, descending into a future he cannot predict or control. For the first time in his life, the man who always had all the answers is completely speechless in the face of the most important question he's ever faced. How to be a father to a son he didn't know existed. The small airport in Hobart is little more than a concrete strip with a modest hangar and a makeshift waiting room. When the jet's stairs are in place and the door opens, Alonso feels the island's humid warmth envelop him like a premonition. The relentless midday sun reflects off the tarmac, creating heat waves that distort the mountainous landscape. Welcome to Hobart, Sophia announces to the group, her professional voice contrasting with the intensity of her gaze when it briefly meets Alonso's. Unfortunately, we'll need a few hours for maintenance. The issue with the secondary hydraulic system requires parts being flown in from Melbourne. I recommend you take the opportunity to see the city or rest at the local hotel. Local hotel? Chloe can't hide the horror in her voice, her eyes scanning the rural landscape with obvious discomfort. What kind of place is this? Alonso watches little Leo go down the stairs, the boy's energy in stark contrast to the palpable tension among the adults. The boy clings to Sophia's hand, looking at everything around him with the insatiable curiosity typical of a 5-year-old. Mum, can we go see the planes in the hangar before we go home? The little one asks, tugging slightly on the sleeve of her uniform. Home. The word echoes in Alonso's mind. This place was his home. His son had grown up here, away from him, building memories he would never be a part of. We have guests today, darling, Sophia replies, stroking the boy's hair. We have to be good hosts. Is Mr. Vega and the lady coming to our place? The enthusiasm in the boy's voice makes Alonso's heart clench. Can I show them my complete plane collection? Before Sophia can answer, an older man approaches, walking with the help of a stick. His sharp eyes examine the group for a moment before a warm smile forms. Grandpa Charlie, He runs to the elder, who lifts him with surprising strength for his apparent age. "These are our passengers," Sophia explains, maintaining her professional composure. "Mr. Alonso Vega and little Miss Chloe Montero. We have a technical issue and will have to stay until tomorrow." Grandpa Charlie's eyes fix on Alonso with a disconcerting intensity, as if seeing much more than the businessman's polished facade. "Vega," he repeats slowly. "The famous property developer. What an interesting coincidence." However, there is nothing coincidental in his tone, and Alonso realizes immediately that the elder knows exactly who he is and what he represents in Sophia and Leo's lives. "Well, we can't leave our visitors without proper accommodation," Charlie continues. "Our guest house is at your disposal, though it's not as luxurious as the hotels you must be used to." "Guest house?" Chloe whispers to Alonso, her distaste evident. "I appreciate the offer," Alonso replies, feeling strangely vulnerable under the old man's penetrating gaze. "But we don't want to bother. There must be a hotel in the city." "The only hotel is being renovated," Charlie smiles with a twinkle in his eyes. "Our guest house is small but comfortable, and it's near the mechanic's workshop, which will make things easier when the parts arrive." Alonso realizes the subtly built trap. There were no coincidences here, from the technical failure to the only available accommodation option. "Grandpa makes the best breakfast in the world," Leo exclaims, hanging from the old man's neck. "And there's a lake where we can see turtles." "Looks like we don't have many options," Alonso concedes, trying to ignore Chloe's furious look. 20 minutes later, an old car pulls up in front of a charming colonial house, now a guest house. Well-kept gardens frame the century-old building, and the scent of jasmine fills the air. In the background, a serene lake reflects the blue sky, and green mountains complete the bucolic landscape. "Welcome to the Blue Horizon Guest House," Charlie announces, guiding them through the polished wooden porch. "We only have 5 suites, but they all have views of the lake or the mountains." The interior is a harmonious blend of preserved antiques and discreetly integrated modern comforts. Black and white photographs decorate the walls, telling the story of the region and the family. "It's charming," Chloe comments, clearly disappointed but trying to be polite. Leo tugs on Alonso's hand, taking him by surprise. "Come see my room. It has a whole wall of planes." And Alonso gives Sophia an inquisitive look, who gives a slight authorizing nod, allowing him to follow the boy. The hallway they walk down is decorated with more old photographs, many of them showing a younger Sophia, some with an old man in a pilot's uniform, whom Alonso assumes is Sophia's grandfather. Leo's room is an aviation miniature dream. An entire wall has been transformed into a sky, with hand-painted clouds and dozens of model planes hanging at different heights. A bed shaped like a cockpit dominates the center, and shelves display children's books about aviation, many in Spanish and English. "This is me when I'm big," Leo points to a poster of a pilot in front of a Boeing 787. "I'm going to fly all over the world like my dad." Alonso's heart lurches. "Your dad?" "He's an international pilot," Leo replies with innocent pride. "Mum says he flies so far and for so long he can't visit us, but one day when I'm a pilot too, I'll find him in the sky." The simplicity of the explanation, the purity of the hope in the boy's eyes, hits Alonso like a physical blow. What kind of man had he become for Sophia to need to create this story? What kind of man would he be now in the face of this revelation? "I'm sure you will," he manages to say with a shaky voice. "Leo!" Sophia appears in the doorway, her gaze cautious. "Time for lunch, darling. Go wash your hands." The boy runs off, leaving Alonso and Sophia alone in the room filled with childhood dreams. "You told him his dad's a pilot," Alonso murmurs, not as an accusation but as a painful observation. "Seemed appropriate?" she responds, defensively crossing her arms. "He's loved planes since he was little. Must be a blood thing." "Sophia, No!" she interrupts, her voice low but firm. "Not here, not now. We have a lunch to survive with your son and your fiancé at the same table, one drama at a time, Alonso." She was right as always. Sophia had been the sensible one, the one who thought 3 steps ahead while he only reacted. Lunch is served on the back porch, overlooking the lake. The table is set with a simple elegance: a linen tablecloth, antique dinnerware, polished silver cutlery. Charlie presides over the head of the table, with Leo by his side. Sophia sits next to her son, while Alonso and Chloe occupy the opposite side. "Hope you like homemade food," Charlie comments, as a middle-aged woman serves a steaming vegetable soup. "Mrs. Celia has been our cook for 30 years. "It's delicious," Alonso comments sincerely after the first spoonful, surprising himself. When was the last time he'd appreciated something as simple as homemade soup? "So, Mr. Vega," Charlie begins the conversation after a few minutes of awkward silence, "how did you meet our Sophia?" Alonso almost chokes on his bread, while Chloe raises an eyebrow, clearly interested in the answer. "We met at an aerospace engineering event," Sophia answers quickly. "Mr. Vega was investing in a private airport project." "Ah, yes," Charlie smiles, unconvinced by the half-truth. "And now you reconnect years later. Destiny has curious ways." "Do you believe in destiny?" Chloe asks, trying to join the conversation. "I believe in consequences," the old man replies, his eyes fixed on Alonso. "Every choice we make creates ripples that eventually return to our shore, no matter how far we swim to avoid them." The silence that follows is only interrupted by the clinking of cutlery and the occasional voice of Leo, oblivious to the tension among the adults, animatedly recounting his day at school. After dessert, a pumpkin pudding with cinnamon, which Alonso is surprised to enjoy, Charlie suggests they rest a bit before dinner. "The sweets are already out. I imagine you're tired from the trip." "Actually," Chloe rises gracefully, "I'd love to see a bit of the city. Alonso, would you mind coming with me?" Before he can answer, Leo eagerly chimes in. "Can I show them the city? I know all the cool spots." The panicked look Alonso gives Sophia is met with a slight, challenging smile. "It would be educational for Leo to be a guide," she comments casually. "If you don't mind, of course." Alonso begins, looking at Chloe, who is clearly not thrilled with the idea. "I'll go with you," Sophia decides. "There are places Leo doesn't know well yet. We can show you the lookout and the historic church." The short excursion through the rural town becomes a strange emotional journey for Alonso. Watching Leo running ahead, enthusiastically pointing out details only a child would notice, with Sophia walking silently by his side, creates a disturbing illusion of a family life that never existed. Chloe, noticing the strange dynamic, subtly distances herself, feigning interest in the windows of the small craft shops. "He's extraordinary," Alonso comments in a low voice. Watching Leo explain to a visibly uncomfortable Chloe how the old clocks in the church tower work. "He is," Sophia agrees, "despite you." The harshness of the words contrasts with the softness of her voice. "Sophia, I didn't know." "Would it have made a difference?" she interrupts, finally looking directly at him. "If you'd known I was pregnant when you decided to leave a note and disappear." The question hangs between them, as heavy as the humid air before a storm. Alonso wants to say yes, that he would never have left if he'd known. But the truth is much more complex. The man he was 5 years ago, would he have stayed? Or would he have simply offered financial support, maintaining the emotional distance he'd always treasured? "I don't know," he answers honestly. "I was a different person then." "And who are you now, Alonso?" The question is almost a whisper. The man who's going to propose to the model, or the man who just found out he has a son? Before he can answer, Leo runs back, holding something in his hands. "Look what I found, Mum. A wooden plane." The shopkeeper said it's handmade. "It's beautiful, darling," Sophia smiles, stroking her son's hair. "Can I, Mum?" "Please." The boy looks hopeful, having clearly discussed something with the shop artisan. "Okay, but only for a moment." Leo turns to Alonso, extending the small wooden plane. "Want to hold it? The man said it brings good luck when you give it to someone special to touch it first." The world seems to stop as Alonso takes the gift from the little hands. Something so simple, a wooden toy, suddenly carries the weight of all the choices he had made and all the ones he still had to make. "It's very special," he manages to say. His voice is hoarse with emotion. Thank you, Leo. In the distance, Chloe watches the scene, a calculating expression gradually replacing her initial discomfort. The night falls over Hobart with a speed typical of small islands. Dinner at the guest house is served by candlelight in the garden, under a starry sky Alonso can barely remember when he last appreciated. After dinner, while Leo is put to bed, the adults gather in the living room. Charlie pours an amber-colored drink into small crystal glasses. "Home-made honey liquor," he explains, "perfect for difficult conversations." Chloe glances at her watch, a discreet but visibly expensive model. "I think I'll go to bed," she announces, giving Alonso a meaningful look. "It's been an unexpected day." When she leaves the room, Charlie also gets up. "I think you two have a lot to discuss," he says, his wise eyes moving between Alonso and Sophia. "Just remember, some structures, once broken, can never be rebuilt exactly as they were, but sometimes what's built in their place is stronger, truer." With these enigmatic words, the old man withdraws, leaving them alone with the heavy silence and the sweet aroma of the liquor. "Why now?" Alonso finally asks. "After 5 years?" Sophia swirls the liquid in her glass, watching the candlelight reflect in the facets of the crystal. "It wasn't my idea," she admits. "But when the opportunity came up, I couldn't say no." "What opportunity?" "Your mother." Sophia looks him in the eyes, the revelation hanging between them like smoke. "She found me 6 months ago." Alonso feels his blood run cold. "My mother? How?" "Private investigators. Apparently, she always suspected you might have a child somewhere. She said you follow a predictable pattern, intense commitment followed by an abrupt flight when things get emotionally deep." The description of his behavior is astonishing in its accuracy. It was exactly what he had done with Sophia and with others before her. "And Chloe, is she part of this plan too?" Sophia's smile is sad, almost compassionate. "Your fiancée is Amanda Vidal, a private investigator hired by your mother more than a year ago. She's not an international model, Alonso. She has a law degree and specializes in locating people and building behavioral profiles." The shock of the revelation is like a physical blow. Alonso stands abruptly, his mind reeling with the implications. 2 years of a relationship, all the intimate moments, the shared confidences, all part of an elaborate trap? "I don't think so," he murmurs, though deep down he knows it's true. It explains the mysterious message, the calculated serenity of Chloe, or rather Amanda, in the face of the day's strange situations. "Why would my mother do this?" he asks, his voice hoarse with contained emotion. "That," Sophia replies softly, "is something you'll have to ask her. She'll be here tomorrow." The sunrise in Hobart brings a symphony of sounds Alonso had forgotten existed. The birdsong, the gentle rustle of the wind in the leaves, the distant moo of cattle on neighboring farms. Sitting on the guest house porch, a mug of strong coffee in his hands, the businessman watches the first rays of sun paint the lake gold while his mind processes the revelations of the previous night. Chloe, or rather Amanda, was not in her room when he returned. His first impulse is to call his lawyer, initiate some kind of legal action against this invasion of privacy, this elaborate manipulation. But something stops him. Perhaps the honey liquor, perhaps Sophia's sincere gaze, or maybe, just maybe, the weight of a responsibility that is beginning to take a concrete shape in his consciousness. "You were always an early riser." His mother's voice startles him, making him almost spill his coffee. Catherine Vega, in her late 60s, had maintained the discreet elegance and impeccable posture that had always characterized her. Dressed with a simplicity that still screams sophistication, she sits in the chair next to her son. Her eyes, the same brown eyes he had inherited, study him with that familiar intensity. "Mum," Alonso manages to say, surprise giving way to confusion, and then irritation. "You have a lot of explaining to do." "I do," she agrees calmly, pouring herself coffee from the thermos on the rustic table. "Just like you do." And the silence between them stretches for a few moments, filled only with the sounds of nature waking up. Alonso struggles to organize his thoughts, to formulate the right questions, to understand how his own mother, the woman who had always respected his space, his decisions, his independence, had orchestrated such an elaborate intervention in his life. "Why?" is all he can finally ask. Catherine takes a deep breath, her eyes lost in the landscape for a moment before returning to her son. "Because you're becoming your father," she responds with a softness that doesn't lessen the word's force. "And I promised myself, when I first held you, that I would do everything in my power to prevent that from happening." The mention of his father makes Alonso tense. Albert Vega had been a ruthless businessman, building an empire at the cost of destroyed relationships, including his marriage and his relationship with his son. He had died alone in his luxury penthouse, surrounded by wealth and empty of genuine connections. "I'm not like him," Alonso protests, his voice low but firm. "No?" Catherine raises an eyebrow. "How many relationships have you ended at the first sign of emotional depth? How many times have you abandoned people who cared about you because it was easier than facing your own vulnerability? Your father did the exact same thing, Alonso. The difference is that he had me to clean up the mess." The words hit Alonso like stones thrown with precision, each one finding a truth he had spent years denying. "And who cleaned up my mess?" he asks, fearing the answer. "No one," Catherine replies simply. "Sophia refused any contact, any help. When I finally found out about Leo's existence through investigators I hired on a purely maternal intuition, she had already rebuilt her life here." "How?" he asks. "How is she doing now?" The question escapes him before Alonso can contain it. A small smile curls Catherine's lips. "Extraordinary. She used her engineering background to specialize in aviation. She works for 3 different companies. She flies to international destinations. She's raised a son alone. She's built an impeccable reputation, and yet she's taken the time to be an active part of this community." The pride in his mother's voice as she talks about Sophia is unmistakable. And Alonso feels a pang of jealousy, not of the admiration for Sophia, but of the strength of character he himself had never been able to show. "And now?" he asks, placing the empty mug on the table. "What do you expect to happen? That I'll abandon my life, my businesses, and move to this little town to play happy families?" The look Catherine gives her son is a mix of disappointment and stubborn hope. "I expect you, for the first time in your life, to face the consequences of your choices instead of running from them. To get to know your son, not because you have to, but because he deserves to be known. And maybe, just maybe, to learn that there are more valuable things in this life than corporate mergers and quarterly profits." Before Alonso can reply, the sound of a child's footsteps interrupts the conversation. Leo appears on the porch, still in his pajamas, rubbing his sleepy eyes. "Good day," he murmurs. Then he freezes when he sees Catherine. His eyes widen, sleep instantly replaced by vibrant curiosity. "You're the lady from the portrait." Catherine smiles, genuinely surprised. "Portrait?" "In Grandpa Charlie's office," Leo explains, cautiously approaching. "There's a photo of you with him from a long time ago. Grandpa said you were a great family friend." Alonso looks at his mother, confused. Catherine seems equally surprised by the mention of the portrait, but quickly regains her composure. "Yes, I met your grandfather many years ago," she confirms, "even before you were born." Leo studies Catherine with an almost comical intensity, his little brow wrinkled in concentration. "You look like him," he finally declares, pointing to Alonso. "She's my mum," Alonso explains. The word sounds strange in his own ears. "Then that makes her your grandma?" Leo's eyes light up with understanding. "Are you my grandma?" Catherine gives Alonso a quick glance before nodding. "Yes, darling, I'm your grandma." What happens next takes Alonso completely by surprise. Leo launches himself into Catherine's arms with complete abandon, hugging her as if he's found a lost treasure. "I have a grandma," he exclaims, the sheer joy in his voice making something break inside Alonso's chest. "Wait till I tell Liam at school. He has 3 grandmas, but his grandma isn't as pretty as you." Catherine laughs, hugging her grandson with a naturalness that makes Alonso realize this isn't their first meeting. The thought should have made him angry. Another manipulation, another secret. But instead, he only feels a profound sadness for the moments he's missed. The first words, the first steps, the first smiles he'd never witnessed. "Have you had breakfast yet, champ?" Catherine asks, pulling back just enough to look at her grandson's animated face. "Not yet. Mum said I can have hot chocolate today because it's a special day." "And what special day is this?" Alonso can't help but ask. Leo looks at him as if the answer is obvious. "Important visitor day. Grandpa Charlie says people who come from far away deserve hot chocolate." The simplicity of the child's logic makes Alonso smile involuntarily. There's something refreshing about the way children see the world, without the layers of complication adults add to everything. "Leo, darling," Sophia's voice sounds from the porch door, "don't bother the guests so early." "I'm not bothering them," the boy protests. "I'm meeting my grandma." Sophia freezes. Her eyes meet Catherine's in a silent dialogue Alonso can't decipher. There's a deeper story there than he had initially imagined. "G'day, Catherine," Sophia finally says, approaching. "I didn't know you'd arrive so early." "First flight out," Catherine replies simply. "Charlie picked me up from the airport." Another piece of the puzzle. Charlie, Sophia's grandfather, was clearly involved in this family conspiracy. The more Alonso discovers, the more he realizes how elaborate the web woven around him has been. "How long have you known my mother exactly?" Alonso finally asks Sophia. "Personally for 6 months," she replies, sitting down at the table. "But through letters, almost 3 years." "Letters?" Alonso looks at Catherine, incredulous. In the digital age, his mother shrugs elegantly. Some conversations are too sacred for emails, which can be hacked, or messages that can be spied on. And there's something about handwriting that forces sincerity, don't you think? Before Alonso can fully process this new information, Amanda, the fake Chloe, appears on the porch, dressed in practical clothes that contrast dramatically with the elaborate style she'd maintained during the 2 years of her relationship with Alonso. "G'day, everyone," she greets. Her accent is subtly different from what Alonso is used to. "I imagine it's time we drop the pretense." Alonso stands abruptly. 2 years, Amanda. 2 years of lies? "I prefer to think of it as 2 years of in-depth research," she responds calmly. "And believe me, Alonso, I learned a lot more about you than I'll ever need to reveal to your mother." "Why?" The question is aimed at everyone, and no one in particular. "Why this elaborate theatre? Why didn't you just tell me about Leo?" "I tried," Sophia responds softly. "In the first months after I found out I was pregnant, I sent dozens of emails. I left countless messages, all blocked, all ignored. And when I finally found you," Catherine continues, "you were so immersed in your world of business, so convinced of your own narrative, that any mention of past responsibilities was immediately rejected. We needed you to see," Amanda adds, "not just to find out, not just to know intellectually, but to see your son, to feel his reality, to understand what you were missing out on before it was too late." Alonso sits back down, stunned by the brutal honesty of these 3 women, who each in their own way had conspired to confront him with the truth he had spent years avoiding. "And what happens now?" he asks, his voice more vulnerable than he had ever allowed in public. "That," Sophia replies, "depends entirely on you, not on the Vega Empire, not on the impeccable CEO, not on the man who built skyscrapers and exclusive resorts. It depends on Alonso, the man, the father, the person you choose to be from today." The silence that follows is interrupted by the arrival of Charlie, carrying a tray with homemade pastries and more fresh coffee. The old man assesses the scene with shrewd eyes before smiling. "I see the formal introductions have been made," he comments casually. "Excellent. I hate secrets at breakfast. They make digestion difficult." The comment, so mundane in the midst of the moment's emotional intensity, elicits a reluctant laugh around the table, momentarily easing the tension. "Catherine," Charlie continues, sitting at the head of the table, "Leo's eager to show you his collection. I think he inherited his grandfather's technical eye." The casual mention of the relationship makes Alonso look up. "You were a pilot," he recalls, connecting the dots from the photos in the hallway. Charlie nods. 42-year career. I started in small cargo planes and ended up commanding Boeing 747s for Qantas. The passion for flying has been in the family for 3 generations now. 4, Catherine corrects softly. Alonso's father was also fascinated with aviation, although he never pursued a career. Another unexpected revelation. Alonso looks at his mother confused. Dad rarely talked about anything he couldn't control completely. And the sky, Alonso, Catherine responds. The sky can never be truly controlled. It can only be respected, understood, navigated with humility. The analogy is not lost on him. Alonso glimpses for the first time the possibility that his life, so carefully planned, so rigidly controlled, might be missing out on the very thing that would make it meaningful. The ability to adapt to the unexpected, to navigate the uncontrollable, to find beauty in unpredictability. Leo returns at that moment, now fully dressed and brimming with energy.
Grandma, you coming to see my collection? It's got a plane like the one Mr. Alonso came in now.
It's a Gulfstream G150, Alonso corrects automatically before the boy can. I'd like to see your collection too, Leo, he suggests, surprising himself. The smile that lights up the boy's face is like a ray of sun piercing through heavy clouds. Bright, unexpected, transformative. For a brief moment, Alonso glimpses what could have been, and maybe what could still be. As they follow Leo down the guest house hallway, Sophia approaches Alonso, her voice low enough for only him to hear. He has your smile, she comments, and your stubbornness. There is no bitterness in her words, just a simple statement of undeniable biological facts. Alonso nods, unable to find words suitable for the moment. The visit to Leo's room turns into an impromptu aviation lesson, with the boy displaying a surprising knowledge for his age. With each enthusiastic explanation, each meticulous demonstration, Alonso feels something foreign growing in his chest. A mix of pride, admiration, and sadness for the lost years. The hours turn into days as the jet's supposed technical failure conveniently extends. Alonso discovers that his phone mysteriously has no proper signal for video calls, limiting him to brief emails and text messages to his team. The Vega Empire will continue to run without his constant presence, a realization both liberating and unsettling for a man who had always believed himself to be indispensable. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, Alonso finds himself sitting by the lake, watching Leo feed ducks with pieces of old bread. Beside the boy, Catherine laughs at something he said, her eyes sparkling with a joy Alonso had rarely witnessed. He's completely conquered my mother, he comments, when Sophia approaches, bringing a tray with fresh lemonade. Leo has that effect on people, she responds, sitting on the rustic bench beside him. It's like he can see right through the layers we've built over the years. Alonso nods, looking at his son. It's still strange to think of him that way, running after a particularly audacious duck that's trying to steal the bread right out of his hands. Does he know? He finally asks the question that had been consuming him for days. About me, I mean. Sophia takes a sip of lemonade, her eyes fixed on the scene in front of her. He knows his father is someone who couldn't be present, who works far away, who one day might be a part of his life. Soft lies, Alonso murmurs. Adapted truths, Sophia corrects. Leo is still too young to understand abandonment or rejection. When he's older, if you decide to be a part of his life, he'll understand that people make mistakes, learn, and grow. What would you do? Would you be able to build a future with your son, no matter the mistakes of the past? Share your opinion in the comments. Alonso stands indignant. Empty! I built an empire that employs thousands of people. I transformed entire neighborhoods. I revolutionized the country's luxury real estate market. And when you go back to your $50 million penthouse at night, who's there to listen about your day? Amanda asks quietly. When you receive an award, who genuinely celebrates your success? When you're sick, who holds your hand? The questions hang between them, uncomfortably precise. Alonso looks away, unable to hold the intensity in Amanda's eyes. Your mother didn't do this out of cruelty, Alonso, she continues. She did it out of love, because she saw her own husband go down the same path and end up alone, despite all his wealth and power.
What do you know about my father? Alonso asks defensively.
I know he also had a son he didn't acknowledge, Amanda responds calmly. A son who grew up without knowing his true origins until a rare genetic disease revealed the truth. Alonso feels his blood run cold in his veins. What are you talking about? Ask your mother. Amanda gets up. Some stories aren't mine to tell. She walks away, leaving Alonso with more questions than answers, a pattern that seemed to define his days in that small town. That night, the guest house hosts a special dinner in the garden, lit by colourful lanterns hung from the trees. A long table has been set, covered with a white linen tablecloth and decorated with wildflowers in rustic vases. The food, simple but delicious, is served on artisanal ceramic plates, accompanied by red wine produced at a nearby winery. Leo is allowed to stay up beyond his usual bedtime, participating in the meal with the adults, although his energy clearly begins to wane as the night progresses. Finally, he falls asleep on Sophia's lap, who continues to participate in the conversation while gently stroking her son's hair. It's time to put him to bed, she murmurs, trying to get up without waking the boy.
Can I help? Alonso offers impulsively.
Sophia hesitates for a moment before nodding. Carefully, Alonso takes Leo into his arms, surprised by how much the little body weighs. A comforting weight that seems to fill a void in his chest he didn't even know existed. Following Sophia down the hallway, he enters the boy's now familiar room, after days of visits to see his plane collection and listen to endless stories about famous pilots and extraordinary aircraft. With a tenderness he didn't know he possessed, Alonso lays Leo on the cockpit-shaped bed. The boy moves slightly but doesn't wake up as Sophia carefully takes off his shoes and covers him with a duvet decorated with clouds and planes. Does he always sleep like that? Alonso asks in a low voice. So peacefully. Most nights, Sophia responds, adjusting the pillow's position. Except when there are storms. He's afraid of thunder. Another detail about his son that Alonso would never have known, were it not for this elaborate intervention. How many others were there? First tooth, first word, first step. Milestones he had irremediably missed. Why are you letting me into his life now? He asks when they leave the room, leaving the door ajar, as per Sophia's instructions. After 5 years of keeping him away from me? Sophia leans against the hallway wall, her eyes studying him with that familiar intensity that always leaves him uncomfortably exposed. Because Leo is starting to ask questions I can no longer answer with stories about pilots on international routes, she responds honestly. Because he deserves the opportunity to know his complete history, even if that includes a father who chose not to be part of his life. And if I want to be a part of it now? The words escape him before Alonso can fully consider them. That would depend entirely on your terms, Alonso, Sophia responds, crossing her arms defensively. Leo is not a weekend project or a social obligation to impress investors. He's a complete person with emotional needs, with expectations, with a heart that can be easily broken.
I wouldn't do that, Alonso protests.
You already did, Sophia replies simply. With me, with others before me, I imagine. It's a pattern, Alonso. One your mother recognized because she lived with your father. The brutal frankness of her words hits Alonso like cold water, waking him up to truths he had avoided confronting his entire adult life. I don't know, he finally admits. The honesty is painful, but necessary. I want to believe I do. I want to be better than my father was, but I don't know if I know how. Sophia's face softens slightly at this unexpected vulnerability. No one is born knowing how to be a father, Alonso. It's a skill you learn daily through trial and error. The difference is that some choose to learn while others run away at the first sign of difficulty. Alonso nods, finally understanding the magnitude of the choice before him. It's not just about legally recognizing Leo or providing financial support. It's about committing to a journey of personal growth that will require more courage from him than any business negotiation he's ever faced. The first rays of sun filter through the guest house room window, waking Alonso from a surprisingly deep sleep. For a moment he feels disoriented, accustomed to the skyscraper panorama his Sydney penthouse offers. Instead, he only sees blue sky, distant mountains, and the golden sheen of the lake through the window. A week had passed since his unplanned arrival in Hobart, a week that felt simultaneously like an instant and an eternity. The jet's technical failure had finally been resolved, and today was the day to either leave or somehow choose to stay. He gets up and walks to the window. In the garden below, Leo plays with a small paper plane, running and launching it into the air repeatedly, adjusting the angle with each attempt, intuitively learning about aerodynamics through play. Sophia watches him closely, smiling as she sips her morning coffee. Alonso feels a sharp pang in his chest, not of pain, but of recognition. The scene below is a glimpse of a life he had never lived, of a possibility he had discarded without even understanding its value. His phone buzzes on the bedside table. The signal, miraculously restored the night before, brings dozens of emails, messages, and notifications, his empire calling him back. One notification in particular catches his eye. Vega Corporation's shares had fallen 3%, following rumors about an unacknowledged heir of the CEO. The news had already leaked. Probably the work of some airport employee who recognized the famous businessman boarding with the international model and disembarking in a small town with a pilot and a child who was his spitting image. Another email, this one from his financial director, warns of an urgent board meeting needed to control the company's image damage. Alonso almost laughs at the irony. His entire adult life dedicated to building an impeccable reputation, and now the existence of his own son is considered damage that must be controlled. He gets dressed slowly, each movement deliberate, as if he's making a decision with every button he fastens, every choice of clothing. When he finally goes down for breakfast, he finds the family gathered in the garden. Not just Sophia and Leo, but also Charlie, Catherine, and surprisingly Amanda. Still present, even though her mission was technically complete.
"Good day," he greets, feeling strangely nervous, as if he's about to give a crucial presentation to investors, instead of having coffee with people who in different ways are his family. "Alonso," Leo greets animatedly. "Look how far my plane can fly now." The boy launches the small paper plane, which this time traces an elegant arc in the air before landing gently on the grass several meters away. "Impressive," Alonso comments sincerely, sitting at the table. "Did you adjust the wings angle?" Leo nods enthusiastically. "Grandpa Charlie showed me how. It's all about aerodynamics." "Leo has an intuitive grasp of physics that's really remarkable for his age," Sophia comments, passing Alonso a mug of coffee. "His science teacher says he asks questions many adults wouldn't think to ask." The pride in her voice is evident, as is the silent implication. "You missed all this. 5 years of achievements, discoveries, first times. I imagine you're keen to get back to civilization," Charlie comments, looking at him over his reading glasses with the local newspaper open in front of him. "The jet's been ready since last night."
"Actually," Alonso begins, surprising himself with the words that follow, "I was thinking of staying a few more days, if it's not an inconvenience."
The silence that follows is eloquent. Sophia looks up from her mug, visibly surprised. Catherine smiles softly, as if she had foreseen this moment. Leo, oblivious to the adult complexities, simply celebrates. "Yes! We can go to the Aviation Museum in Santa Cruz, Hobart. There's a real Spitfire there."
"It would be acceptable," Sophia replies cautiously, her eyes studying Alonso with a newfound wariness.
"I have some virtual meetings I can't postpone," Alonso explains. "But they can be done from here, and I'd like to get to know Leo's routine better." That afternoon, while Leo is at school, Alonso finally has the conversation he'd been avoiding with his mother. Sitting by the lake, away from the others' ears, Catherine confirms what Amanda had hinted at. "Your father had another son," she reveals calmly. 3 years older than you, with a company secretary before we met. When she got pregnant, he fired her and denied any responsibility."
"And how did you find out?"
Alonso asks, feeling a strange mixture of shock and inexplicable relief, as if a mystery he didn't even know existed finally makes sense.
"When you were 12, we got a call from the hospital. A 15-year-old boy urgently needed a bone marrow transplant. He had a rare genetic condition that also runs in your father's family. The doctors had traced compatible potential donors."
"And he was my brother?" "Riley." Catherine provides the name softly. "He was my half-brother?" "Yes," she confirms. "Your father denied it to the end, even when the tests confirmed it. He refused to help. He forbade you from being tested as a possible donor."
Alonso closes his eyes, trying to process the magnitude of this revelation. "And what happened to him?"
"He found another donor, less compatible. He survived, but with complications. He now lives in Sydney. He's a university engineering professor. Did you stay in touch?"
"Discreetly. Your father never knew. Riley contacted me when he was 20, wanting to know his story. He wasn't angry, just curious. He's an extraordinary man, Alonso. You would like—"
Alonso feels as if the ground is opening up beneath his feet. His whole life he believed he was an only child, raised by an emotionally distant but at least physically present father. Now he discovers he's part of a pattern, a cycle of abandonment he's dangerously close to repeating.
"Why are you telling me this now?" he asks, though he already guesses the answer.
"Because you're at the same crossroads as your father. Twice he chose the path of least emotional involvement, with Riley and then with you in his own way. The question is, what choice will you make, Alonso?" That night, after helping Leo with his homework, a surprisingly gratifying experience, Alonso finds Sophia alone on the porch, looking at the stars. Without preamble, he says, "I want to be a part of his life. I don't know how. I don't know if I'll be good at it, but I want to try." Sophia continues to look at the sky for a long moment before replying, "It's not a simple decision, Alonso. It's not just about occasional visits or expensive birthday gifts. It's about consistency, commitment, being present, even when it's inconvenient."
"I know," he responds, approaching to look at the same sky she's contemplating. "I'm willing to learn, to change whatever's necessary."
"Why?" The question is simple but loaded with meaning. Why now, after 5 years?
Alonso considers several answers, some calculated to impress her, others to elicit pity. But in the end, he chooses the simple, raw truth. "Because when I look at Leo, I see the person I could have been if I'd learned early on that connection is more important than control. And because I don't want him to grow up thinking he wasn't important enough for me to change." Something in Sophia's face softens almost imperceptibly at this unexpected vulnerability. "No one is born knowing how to be a father, Alonso. It's a skill you learn daily through trial and error. The difference is that some choose to learn, while others run away at the first sign of difficulty." Alonso nods, finally understanding the magnitude of the choice before him. If you're feeling inspired, give this a like and subscribe for more stories that will make you think. And if you're game, comment on what choice you think is the hardest. 3 months later, Alonso watches from the co-pilot's seat as Sophia pilots the small plane over the island's green mountains. In the back seat, Leo enthusiastically points to the cloud formations and landscape details below, his animated voice amplified by the headphones. Much has changed since that first interrupted flight. Alonso had kept his word, reorganizing his life to include regular visits to Hobart. He'd rented a house in the city for weekends, learned to cook Leo's favorite dishes, and even started taking flying lessons. Not to compete with Sophia, but to better understand the world that so fascinated his son. The Vega corporations had survived the initial scandal, and after a press conference where Alonso publicly acknowledged his paternity of Leo, the shares had stabilized. Some conservative investors left. Others surprisingly saw the transparency as a positive sign of corporate maturity. "Look, Dad!" Leo's voice on the headphones still causes a surge of emotion in Alonso every time he calls him that, a title he's slowly learning to earn. "That's our lake down there." "I see it," he replies, smiling at his son's enthusiasm.
Everything looks different when you change your perspective, Sophia comments, gently adjusting the controls. Ready to take control for a minute? The offer surprises Alonso. Are you sure? We're at cruising altitude, clear sky, perfect conditions, she replies. That slight smile he's beginning to recognize again, curving her lips. Besides, I have good reflexes if you start steering us towards a mountain. Carefully, Alonso places his hands on the controls, feeling the subtle vibration of the aircraft, the literal responsibility of 3 lives in his hands. It's terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. Are you flying, Dad? Leo exclaims with evident pride in his voice. I am, Alonso confirms, concentrating intensely on keeping the plane level. I'm flying. But somehow those simple words have a much deeper meaning, not just about controlling an aircraft, but about finally taking control of his own life, his choices, his responsibilities. The open sky in front of him, infinite in its possibilities, seems the perfect stage for this moment of clarity. Alonso Vega, who had spent his life building structures that touched the sky, was finally learning to fly. Not alone, as he had always believed was more efficient, but accompanied, guided, supported by people who, in different ways, formed the family he didn't know he needed. And where are we going now? Leo asks. Alonso exchanges a look with Sophia before responding, finding in her eyes not the love they once shared, but something equally valuable. Respect, mutual understanding, and the silent promise of a future where both would put their son's needs above all else. Wherever you want, he replies, knowing that for him the sky was the limit.